Today we're going to talk about the scientific method, but first I want to talk a little bit about science. I want you to think of science as a game that has specific goals and rules to be followed. What scientists do is they look for patterns, and then they use those patterns to make future predictions. Scientists want to separate fact from fiction and help us better understand the world around us. What scientists use as their major tool is a process called the scientific method. And the scientific method looks something like this. Ask a question, research the question, hypothesis, test by experiment, analyze results, and draw conclusion. Now let's go ahead and start with ask a question. What we want to do is ask a specific question. So let's go ahead and write that down. We want our question to be specific. For example, we might ask a question, at what temperature do radish plants grow best at? So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. At what temperature do radish plants grow best at? Now that's a specific question, and as such, we can test it. An example of a general question might be, at what temperature do plants grow best at? Because some plants like colder temperatures, some plants like warmer temperatures. We can't test that adequately. Another example of a general question might be, under what weather conditions do radish plants grow best at? Again, when you talk about the weather, you're talking about the humidity, you're talking about the precipitation, the amount of sunlight that gets received, the wind. All those things are factors, and it's going to be too complicated to test. So at what temperature do radish plants grow best at? That's a specific question that we can test. The next thing you want to do is research the question. You want to look up as much information as you can on this topic. All right? You might go to the internet. You might go to magazines published by other scientists. You might talk to scientists. You might go to the library. But the point is, you want to find as much information as you can so that you don't repeat experiments and information that's already been done. Because in the real world, time is money. And you don't want to waste your time repeating things that are already known. Now the next thing we want to do is our hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess as opposed to a blind guess. Our guess is based on the research that we've done. And there's lots of different ways to write hypotheses. But I want you to use this particular format for this class. All right? It's good to have something to begin with. And the hypothesis is going to go something like this. Right? If the independent variable is related to the dependent variable, then, and then you write your explanation as to why you think that it is. So let's talk about the independent variable and the dependent variable for a second. The independent variable is the factor that a scientist purposely manipulates or changes. And because of that, oftentimes the independent variable is referred to as the manipulated variable. All right? So what do you think we might want to change here as a scientist? Probably you're going to want to change the temperature because you want to find out what temperature radish plants grow best at. So that's going to be our independent variable, the thing we're going to purposely manipulate or change. The next factor is going to be called the dependent variable. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable. I want you to think about it like this. It's the factor that the scientist is going to measure. So what are you going to measure here to see if temperature is influencing the growth of your plants, of your radish plants? Well, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of maybe we want to measure the height of the radish plants. Or maybe we want to measure the mass of the radish plants. Either one would probably be fine. Okay? So my hypothesis might look something like this. If the temperature is related to the height of radish plants, then as the optimal temperature is reached, radish plants will have maximum growth. So that might be my hypothesis. Now I want to go ahead and I want to test that hypothesis. Now, when I set up my experiment, typically I want two groups. I want a control group and I want an experimental group. The control group is what I'm going to compare everything to. I'm just going to let things happen as they would normally happen. The experimental group, I'm going to change one factor, and that one factor is called the independent variable. Now, it's important that our experiments be statistically valid. That means that we can have confidence that our results are true. For example here, if I'm growing radish plants, I probably want to grow more than 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5, because maybe my seeds aren't as hardy as they should be. Maybe something, whatever, is preventing my seeds from growing as well as they should. Or maybe they're growing great, and they're actually growing better than average. So I want a large enough sample size that I can have confidence in my results. For example, I might want to grow 100 radish plants, or even better yet, 1,000 radish plants. And then I'm going to take the average height of all these radish plants and use that. All right? And I can have confidence that my results are close to the truth. Now the next thing you want to keep track of is constants. And I'm going to write the word constant here. And constants are things, they're factors that are similar between the control group and the experimental group. For example, I want to make sure that both my control group and my experimental groups, I use the same type of soil. I give them the same amount of fertilizer. I give them the same amount of water. I expose them to the same amount of sunshine, the same humidity, the same wind. All those things are referred to as constants, factors that are going to be similar between the two groups. The last thing I want to say is, what if we want to test multiple temperatures here? Can we do that? Sure we can. But what we're going to do here is have more than one experimental group. Maybe one experimental group, I'd set the temperature at 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Another experimental group maybe is going to be 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Another experimental group could be 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and so on and so forth. And that way I accomplish a lot more at one time. Finally, I want to analyze the results. All right? I want to see the results of my experiments, see if I see any patterns, see if anything sticks out, see if I can make sense of my data. And then I want to write it up. I want to draw a conclusion. I simply want to state the outcome. So let me go ahead and write that down. Draw a conclusion. We're going to state the outcome. And we're going to state the outcome in third person, meaning we're not going to use any personal pronouns. No, I think, they thought, Sally thought, John said. None of that sort of stuff. Let's just state the outcome here. For example, maybe our conclusion goes something like that, something like this. Radish plants grew best at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be a very simple outcome, and that's all we want for the purpose of this class. Lastly, two things can occur here. One of two things can occur. If your hypothesis turns out to be true, then you might want to publish those results, meaning you might want to share those with other scientists by putting those results in a magazine that other scientists read. However, more often than not, our hypothesis turns out to be false. Things didn't occur as we thought they would. And that's okay to be wrong, because most of the time we're going to be wrong. That doesn't mean we give up. That just means that we learn from our results and we move forward. So if our hypothesis turns out to be false, then what we want to do is make up a new hypothesis. We'll change our hypothesis, and then we'll go through the process again. We'll test by experiment, we'll analyze our results, we'll draw a conclusion. And again, if it's false, we go back to the drawing board, work on a new hypothesis, and we keep doing this over and over. Science is not like TV. Science does not get solved in a single hour. Sometimes it takes months or years to figure something out. So science is a slow process. Be aware of that so that you're not disappointed. And that's going to be it for scientific method.